The ACC this year was a breath of fresh air. With the addition of 3 more teams and more unpredictability, we are nearing the summit where 2 teams look to be crowned the kings of the ACC. But before we talk about the 2 who made it, let's talk about the 15 who weren't so fortunate. It goes without saying that the Cardinal didn't exactly wow anyone in their first year in the ACC. However, that's not to discredit the bits that they have accomplished. Beating Syracuse and Louisville were impressive, but the choke job against Cal just shows that this team just doesn't have the talent that most of the other ACC teams have. This year felt like an experiment, and they'll surely need to continue that in order to find the elements that lead to improvements within the organization. I think for this team it might be time to just hit the reset button. Dave Clawson once again led the Deacons to an unimpressive 2024 campaign. It started with blowing a 13-point lead at Virginia in Week 2, getting curb stomped by Ole Miss in Week 3 in which they canceled arrangements with the Rebels to play them in 2025, to then getting absolutely embarrassed by the Raging Cajuns in Week 4. A team in which they paid $800,000 to play. And sure, the offense was statistically better, but their defense took a massive step back, allowing over 30 a game. That in and of itself is a recipe for disaster. The biggest problem with this team throughout the years was the quarterback position. And when it was announced that Grayson McCall would join the pack, I had high hopes for this team, but alas, it wasn't meant to be. After a rocky start to the year for McCall, he would be injured in their game against Louisiana Tech, and when he returned against Wake Forest, he would see the end of his playing career. I do not blame him one bit for stepping away, and I truly wish him the best. And while the true freshman CJ Bailey was serviceable, this team was just out of sorts. I hope this team can regain its form in 2025, but who knows if that's gonna happen or not. When I tell you this team feels exactly the same as their 2023 counterpart, I mean it in the nicest way possible. Surprisingly, their offense wasn't a total joke after losing Drake May last year and losing Max Johnson in Week 1 to a broken leg. But again, their defense is... Look, why should I have to repeat myself? It's the same song, different verse with these guys. And all you really gotta do is look at the game versus James Madison. You really allowed 53 points in the first half? This kind of garbage should get a coach fired. And that it did. Best to rev up those fryers and put the fries in the bag. I wonder to myself how much the jet lag would truly impact the Golden Bears. For what it's worth, the team wasn't bad. They started off the year 3-0. But when it came time to face the first 4 ACC foes, they would falter in all 4 contests by a combined 9 points. What could have been if they pulled all 4 of those games out? Look at the positive, your defense was stellar. And if that offense can gain some consistency, you should be golden. At least you guys managed to win more than 3 games this year. This team stormed out of the gate with a 4-1 start, even picking up a decent win against Boston College. But when it came time to play the tougher competition in the ACC, we were all reminded that this team is not on the same level from the likes of Clemson and SMU. Oh no, not with this offense. Sadly for the Cavaliers, Anthony Colandrea didn't improve on his mishaps from last year and still insisted on being a turnover machine. At least you showed improvement, so let's just call this a net positive and move on. The same net positivity cannot be said for the team next door. Me and many others were high on this team. How foolish we were on that assessment. Kyron Drones looked set to take another leap in 2024, but unfortunately that was just not the case. He along with Tootin were non-factors in the Russian attack in their first matchup where they were embarrassed by Vanderbilt, who were 13.5-point underdogs. And from that point on, I knew something was seriously wrong. Now fans are wondering if Brent Pry should even still be the coach going forward. And when you look at the game versus Syracuse, I get their frustration. Once up 21-3, they would be tied with 29 seconds left and they decide to play for overtime, even when they had all of their timeouts. You already know what happens next. When pride engages in such sacrilege, I can see why the fans would cry. Get your shit together, man. I'll admit, I was wrong. You were not the cellar dwellers of the ACC. An offense led by Eli Holston and Desmond Reed. A defense that was decent enough. A 7-0 start for the first time since 1982. Things were looking up for the Panthers. Unfortunately, the football gods had other ideas. They would drop their next 5, all against ACC foes, albeit without their starting quarterback for a lot of that span. I wouldn't put my head down too much. You have a solid foundation to work with. Thankfully for Boston College, the switching of the head coach position didn't put a damper on what they wanted to achieve. They started off with an impressive win versus Florida State before we totally wrote them off as frauds. A 4-1 record sounds great, but sadly they would drop 3 straight ACC contests and then the true fun would start. Not revolving around the product on the field, but rather off of it. In their 37-31 victory versus Syracuse, Thomas Castellanos suffered an injury in the third quarter that would take him out of the contest. Fast forward a couple days, Bill O'Brien made the decision to bench Castellanos for Grayson James. Castellanos, let's just say, didn't take it well. He quit on the team mid-season?
You are one pathetic loser.
Absolute comedy. You already know Bill O'Brien is going to react in the most Bill O'Brien way. At least you guys won 7 games though. Give yourselves a pat on the back. What a hell of a year for these guys. If there's one thing I can say about this team is that they have grit. They knocked off number 10 Florida State to start the year, spoiled number 4 Miami's ambitions of an undefeated season, and came dangerously close to beating number 7 Georgia but would choke and lose in an 8 overtime expedition. This is a season to build off of, and if they can keep track in the way they have, they are in for huge success in the future. They didn't make the ACC championship game this time, but the team looked better than they did last year, mainly in their offense, which averaged 36.6 points per game. Sadly, the ACC was just more competitive this go around. The losses they do have were mostly to good teams like Notre Dame, SMU, and Miami, but the loss against Stanford was very confusing to me. There seems to be a lot of what ifs with this team. Par for the course. How about that? I wasn't sure how to gauge this team before the start of the year, mainly due to my uncertainty on Kyle McCord. He ended up leading the entire league in passing yards with 4,326. This offense was just on a different planet than it was under Garrett Schrader last year, scoring 9.1 more points per game. And oh look, you even played spoiler to mix things up for the ACC championship game. Good work. I've come to terms that my prediction in that Duke being the team that would regress the most in the ACC was wrong. In my defense, Mike Elko seemed like a massive loss at the time. But man, Manny Diaz has done a damn good job with this unit. The offense, while shaky at times, was decent with Malik Murphy under center, and the defense was good as expected. It just feels odd that this team could have went 10-2 with that questionable no call versus SMU. It was a great campaign nonetheless. Miami, what the actual fuck was that? This was your best chance to break through and make it to the ACC championship game, and you screwed the pooch big time. You had a generational offense with Cam Ward averaging a league-leading 44.2 points per game, and the defense felt like it was the perfect time to waste it all. Starting 9-0 on the year and ranked 4th in the nation, things would start to unravel when they lost against Georgia Tech. It's all good, you still control your own destiny. Just beat Syracuse and you are good. Look, you're up 21-0. As long as the defense holds it down, you're fine. You're gonna win and make it to the championship game. But then you remembered their defense is literally the fast food equivalents of Arby's. No championship game for you. Such a damn shame this team is.
Nick, who you got in your 12-team bracket?
Well, I've got Georgia, Ohio State, Florida State, Utah.
I'd be lying to you guys if I told you that this wasn't the main reason I made this video, because I have never, ever seen a generational collapse like this one. This was a team that went 13-0 in the regular season a season ago. A team that was ranked number 10 at the start of the year, only to end up 2-10. Many have said that if they made the playoffs last year, this wouldn't have happened, but I'm calling bullshit on that. The harsh reality is that you can blame everyone for this travesty. The quarterback situation was piss poor. The receivers couldn't catch COVID-19 if they tried. The offensive line couldn't block a hamster. The defense was undisciplined and sloppy. The coaches were sorry. The only thing you can say is that the punter and kicker were great. They surely needed it. With both the offense and defensive coordinators fired mid-season, what do you even do? This season will be talked about for ages and not in a good way. Get out of my sight. And with that, we have reached the final two teams. The first is a familiar face while the other is brand spanking new. I guess you don't need the transfer portal after all. They certainly aren't the powerhouse they once were, but due to Miami's defense forgetting how to defense, you are here by default, making it now 13 out of the past 14 championship games that include either FSU or Clemson. They looked terrible in week 1 against Georgia, but they did turn it up after that. And while their last 3 ACC games weren't convincing, you can never count this team out. However, there is a new kid on the block looking to take the piss out of you. To think that this is only their first year in the conference. This team didn't look like they would be anywhere near contention after their first game against Nevada. But when they switched from Preston Stone to Kevin Jennings at quarterback, they were in a league of their own. They were top 5 in points scored and top 20 in points allowed. And with an 8-0 ACC record, they didn't need some weird instance to happen to make it here, unlike Clemson. Will they take the crown in year 1? Here is my prediction. SMU enters the game as slight favorites, but I'm not sure I'm convinced that this will be the year. Not because of them specifically, but because of tradition. From 2011 to now, the only team to win the crown that wasn't Clemson or Florida State was Pitt in 2021. And I think the trend will continue. I mean, I don't know, I'm probably wrong. About as wrong as my predictions to start the year. Man, what was I thinking?